When it comes to UFOs, is there a connection between extraterrestrials and spirituality? This is Robert Manni, host of Guys TV, and this week my special guest is renowned contactee Chris Bledsoe. It all starts right here, right now on Guys TV. You can also catch me on KCAA Radio here in Southern California, Guys Radio, my worldwide podcast, and we're on UK Health Radio all weekend long. Guys TV, Guys Radio, thanks for your support. Okay, Guys Radio, it's the interview portion of our show, and it's a show I'm really looking forward to. We're going to talk with a gentleman. His name is Christopher Bledsoe. You know, everybody, that UFOs has been a hot topic for the past, particularly for the past 10 years and the last 5 years. And I watch a lot of shows on Gaia Network, and I really keep up with all the kind of drip of disclosure. And you've seen on the news that it's becoming more commonplace talking about it. But Chris Bledsoe, my guest here, he is a world famous, if not the most world famous UFO watcher. And he examines it from a very different perspective. It's all about faith, God, and Christianity, not your usual alien connection, if you will. He's got a book. It's called UFO of God. It's a #1 seller on Amazon in its category, and it's the extraordinary true story of Chris and what's happened to him over the last about 20 years. 2007, things started to happen for him. And he had some business challenges around 2007, a financial crisis. He had a debilitating chronic disease, and he was on the verge of the unthinkable, and he called out and asked Spirit for help. And all of a sudden, in the coming days, a UFO showed up in the form of orbs, and then kind of a couple of little guys showed up. And over time, this kept happening, and he eventually was met with a female, a woman, who kind of floated, and he was taken to off planet and met with her, and she spoke telepathically to him about what his purpose was here on Earth. And it's to get the message out about the fact that we can be helped, we can save ourselves, and we're going to get help, but we have to do it ourselves. So that's a quick summation, because what I don't want to do in this interview is just have Chris tell the story and then we're done with the 40 minutes. I want to talk about a snapshot of what Chris experienced and get to where we are now, and then go back and talk. I want to ask some of the questions that you folks out there would want me to ask. So first and foremost, the author of UFO of God, bestseller, Chris Bledsoe. Thank you for being on Guys Radio.
I am totally honored, Guy. I appreciate you having me.
Okay, so let's I gave a quick snapshot, but I'd rather the folks hear it from you. Kind of what happened to you to lead you to that point where you went out with your buddies and you saw some orbs, and what happened from there.
Well, if I go back a little piece to 01, when the World Trade Center thing happened, I was building 130 houses a year. I had been building for 20 years. My dad before me and my wife's family, they were building 350 homes a year. So we were serious in the building business. And when the World Trade Center disaster happened, living in a military town, Fort Bragg, it shut the market down. I had 72 houses under construction and couldn't sell them. And so a slow motion train wreck started happening in 01. And I watched it continue until I sold the business in 2005 at a $2 million loss. And here I am at 46 years old with 4 children, having to sell my home and pay off everything I could. And now I have literally no way to feed my children. I was faced with getting free lunches at school. And I'm sick with Crohn's disease. I'd had a near-death experience from that in 04. And that's why I sold the business. My wife sold it while I was in the hospital. And but let's fast forward to 07. My dad in late 06 talked me into helping him on a job with some of his crew. He had dad build houses. So I took a job, first one since come out of the near-death thing in 05. I took a job down on the coast, almost 2 hours away, and was managing his men. They were subcontractors. And my son, youngest son, Chris Jr., was with me. He wouldn't leave my side because it was just, I was so sick. He thought he had to be my caretaker. So he was with me. And we finished the job in early January. Actually, New Year's Day, they went back down to do the final punch list and bring a check and called me, can we go fishing and celebrate? We don't have to go out of town for any longer. They've been gone 4 months. So I agreed. Chris Jr. and I waited on them to come into town, and we took them. After they cashed their checks, we went down 2.5 miles away to the Cape Fear River, and I wasn't in the mood to fish at all. I was in the worst part of my life, the bottom, and my thoughts. Of course, I wouldn't let them know that. And I got those 3 guys, they were grown men, and my son busy fishing, sitting on the bank of the river. And I walked away about 4 o'clock, went into forest and stayed an hour and just trying to think and talk to whoever's up there. And about 5 o'clock, I came back, or 4:45, out of the forest. We decided to get a fire going because it was going to get cold that night, and daylight was almost gone. And so I left them again, walking up to the field with the excuse I'm going to look for wildlife and watch the sun go down because it was facing west. And so I left at 10 after 5. And when I got that quarter of a mile up the road, I had the shock of my life. And I'm going along, I'm crying out, help me. I got to the top of that hill. There was 2 balls of fire, 40 feet around, 50 feet, glowing, fiery red balls that were rotating really fast, and the flames were shooting off of it. And I'm a commercial rated pilot. I knew straight up it wasn't anything from this world that I'd ever seen. And so fear shot into me like no tomorrow. But what really got bad, fear, what got me, was sitting there looking at it's one thing. You can go out and ride in your car and see a light go by. That's okay. I mean, that's really cool, right?
Sure.
But when that light looks at you and says, I see you, I got you on my radar, there's a different feeling to that. And that's what happened. I turned around to run after a few minutes, hiding, thinking I was hiding, peeping up over the hill, and I'd look at those 2 big balls of fire. They were only 300 yards away and about 100 feet in the air, maybe a couple 100 feet. They were above the trees. And when I turned to run, I looked back one last time, and immediately a third one appeared above me. And it was just like those 2, same thing. And it shot down in front of me within a second. And that's when reality hit me that they knew I was there. They were watching me. I was on that radar of whatever this powerful force was. And I mean, that sent the fear in me. And so the next thing I remember, Guy, was trotting up to the fire the last 50 feet. I don't even remember going down the hill. But when I got there, I was like, you guys won't ever believe what I just saw at the field. I didn't realize the fire was burnt down to a little ember, and they were just standing there, 3 of them. My son wasn't there. And they're like, where have you been? You've been going all night. And so I didn't realize a 4-hour manhunt had happened. And my son was lost. And when I found him, he was in shock. He had witnessed something from another world, these little glowing beings that scared him to death. And all this happened within a few minutes of me get back to the fire. And suddenly these 3 orbs appeared up high. We all saw it. One of the guys shouted, and we looked up, and there were 8 or 9 zooming around. They looked like Venus, big stars up there. And 3 of them came down and landed 75 yards from us across the river. So pandemonium set in, and out of there we left. And that's how it all started. And to not get too deep in it, you can tell me where to go. But
Okay, well, let's take a pause right there. And by the way, it's Robert. So just so you know, because we're
okay,
friends now.
Rob, I'm sorry.
No worry, everybody does the same thing, calls me Guy. So that's cool. But just so you know, so at that point, what did you had these big grown manly men and everybody was scared to death. And at a certain point, though, as I read in the book, that you were not as afraid, even though your son was traumatized and these other guys were traumatized, and you went back home and tried to do your best to process that.
Yeah.
What when you saw, did you see the beings at this juncture, or did you see them later on?
Not yet. Later
Okay.
on, I did, but I
Okay.
wasn't afraid. The weird
Yeah.
thing was, and I reported this way back then to government officials, that I was terrified when it appeared really suddenly and let me know it was there. Then it took me. It came right at me and went over me and took my whole body. It didn't just take my spirit; it took me away from here for 4 hours. And um, when they brought me back, I wasn't afraid when it landed across the river. That's the crazy thing. All these
Mm-hmm.
guys were terrified. My son was in shock. These three men they were doing everything from crying to begging to go home to see their family for the last time. But I wasn't afraid. I was like marveled at it. I wanted to get out and see it more. So they
Mm-hmm.
did something to me when they
So,
took me.
so then when you were home, then shortly after this, you felt that they were approaching your home. And because your son was having a hard time and everybody was kind of freaked out and you hadn't completely processed it, you got your gun and said, I'm gonna settle this. You went out there and then things really changed for you. What happened?
Well, what happened was that was the second night, the gun. That same night when we got home, we actually left out of there and dropped the guys off. And when we got home, Chris Jr. was running through the house, locking it down, turning all the outside lights on. He'd go in a bedroom and shut the windows, turn the light on, and lock the door, even the bathroom doors. Now I'm in my study trying to see on TV, if we're being invaded. I just knew the whole world would have known at that time. Couldn't find anything. And then I heard something go over the house that was just sounded almost like a helicopter from Fort Bragg. And that's what I envisioned. But suddenly my dad has a kennels next door. We live on the same property next to one another. And he had a huge dog kennel enclosed. At one time he had 100 dogs there. But there were 15 hounds that night. And every one of them went to barking this really strange, afraid bark. They were scared. I could tell they were afraid the way they were barking. This really weird sound. It made chills come on you. So I went out the door with my son in tow. After I had to talk him into it, he didn't want any more of that. But I just thought somebody was stealing out of my dad's shop because the shop was next to the dog kennel. And I could think they're seeing somebody break in the shop. But when I got there, the dogs were looking the opposite direction. They were looking in the forest. And my Chesapeake Bay went ahead of us and was sitting there in front of us, pointing in the forest. And I bumped her on the rear and told her to get it, whatever it was in there, to run it out. I thought it was a bear by then, because if it was a human, they would have went to the highway, not in the woods. If they were frightened. Long story short, when I left running, Junior and I, to cut off the dog to get in front of whatever was in there. My plan was to go hide behind an oak tree in the direction I knew it was going to go, the way she went. And I ran up against that tree full force, thinking Christopher was behind me. And I stopped myself in a full run against this tree, trying to be quiet. And I'm panting like this, trying to keep my breath quiet. I hear the dog coming, and I look back to see if Jenner's behind me, and he's not there. But there's this little being, 4 feet from me, 3 to 3.5 feet tall, glowing like the moon. It didn't have these big almond eyes like you hear about. This looked more like a 4-year-old child, but it had some sort of, uh, the eyes were red, but it almost looked mechanical in nature more so. Um,
And
if you
again,
could,
Chris, was this the first night, or this was this?
this is the
This is
first
still the
night.
first night. So you did see
Yeah.
the beings then. So from there, you saw them again when you went out with your gun. That's the next time you
Yeah.
saw
Two
them.
two nights later, yeah, they came
Okay.
back.
And then,
And they actually landed on the property with their orb. It burnt circles in my grass. I
okay.
have pictures of 16-foot circles they burnt. Moved on, investigated it.
And did they communicate with you then telepathically at that point? And
Yeah.
if so, what did they communicate?
Well, the first night when I looked back to see this one
Mm-hmm.
behind me, I was terrified. I thought it was going to kill me. The dog was coming.
Why
And
why
here's
did
the
you think
thing.
that? Why did you think it was going to kill you?
Well, I was afraid of it,
Okay.
and I'd never seen anything like that. It didn't make any moves like it would, but I had my hands against the tree and it's behind me. So I
Mm-hmm.
turned, I got as close to that tree as I could get. And I put my back against it and dropped my
Okay.
hands to my side. And I said, I'm sorry, I surrender. I mean you no harm. And this voice came and said, you don't understand. We're not here to hurt you. We're here to help you. And next day I got up, I wasn't sick anymore. I had 17 years I'd battled this disease, Crohn's disease, my doctor called it. And I had been treated 17 and a half years, and
Amazing.
I no longer had it.
Okay.
But 2 nights later, my wife was still out of town with her family, her mom, and the other three kids. She come home on Friday, but this is like Wednesday night. Chris Jr., the dogs start barking again, this whole pack of hounds. And it draws us to the back door, and there's these orbs landed in the forest behind us. I don't know what got into me, Robert, but I decided that I wanted to end this because I guess it was because my son was so distraught.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to him? He was so afraid. He was in shock, and I felt like I was protecting him. So I grabbed a little rifle. I had a 44 Magnum rifle, a little saddle gun. I used to bear hunt with. And I'm on Boone and Crockett record for one of the largest bears in North America. Let's say I've done my share hunt, and I started hunting at 5 years old. But that night ended that forever. Uh, I walked back there with my gun, and it was landed in a Christmas tree farm, and it was overgrown, so the trees were touching one another, and the only way through the forest is underneath. And I could see it 40 yards in there, pulsating. And I got on my knees and crawled up under. This is a good 3 foot under these trees. There was nothing, not even a weed, because the light didn't hit the ground, just pine needles, and I could see clear in any direction. So I'm crawling up to this thing, and I got about 20 yards or less from it, and the electricity from it was so great, the static, that I felt like my hair became needles and pins all over me, and I couldn't go another step forward. So I turned around and back out of there. And when I got to the edge of the forest, to step out of the forest, I had to go over an old hog fence that was broken down. When I stepped over that fence, two of them appeared right in front of me. The same little guy that I saw in the woods are now on either side as I stepped through.
Let me ask you a question there, Chris, if I may.
Okay.
So did you have a sense that out of the two of them, one was the same one that you had seen previously? Did they look alike? What were they wearing? I know you mentioned that they had the kind of reddish eyes that kind of mechanically open and close, and they had a logo of like a triangle, upward pointing triangle, and they were kind of silvery translucent. Help me out.
Yeah, they were glowing, the soft glow like the moon, but their body looked so shiny like glass.
Did they have arms and hands, and what
Yeah,
were the?
yeah, it looked like a little child, about a 3 or 4 year old child, about that size, and the heads weren't great big like you would see some gray alien. They looked more proportional to you
Did
and
they
I.
did they look human, or like their face, if you will, with this
Yeah,
humanoid
yeah,
looking?
they had human traits, but they
Okay.
were these big glowing eyes were so bright,
Okay. Okay.
and their body was so gleaming. It was hard to look at because the I told the MUFON 15 years ago, 16, that it looked like it had a glass cup, outer covering of glass. It was
Okay.
so shiny,
All right, let me just take a quick break to let everybody know that Chris Bledsoe is my special guest on Guys Radio. We're talking about his best-selling book, UFO of God. I want to make sure, forgive me for hustling you along a little bit, but I want to make sure we get as much information out there for our audience as possible. So the two beings are there. What happens then? They communicated to you. You changed your feeling at this point from what I read in the book that I'm not going to hunt anymore. I'm going to be kind to every sentient being. I don't step on, bugs anymore or whatever. Right. It all changed for you. Your perspective, your consciousness. Is that correct?
Yeah, they woke me up, and what it told me was, first off, I had this rifle, and I felt this extreme shame. It just came over me like this shame that I wanted to cry. And I just tried to hide it behind my back, this gun, but they knew it was there. And what they began to say was that I need to understand that everything has a consciousness, from the earth itself to every living creature, every tree, every plant, that it is connected to God or the whoever is sending the information for us to operate. We're all connected to it. In other words, you don't, the grass, the bugs, if they run from you, they don't want to die, and it's not my right to take that life. And the way they put it in my head, it caused me to completely go through, and I still feel it, this sadness for harming animals that I did growing up, thinking it was. I used to hunt. I used to be a bear hunter.
Do you fish still?
No, I don't like to do it. I fished, but I haven't.
Do you eat meat? I'm not trying to play gotcha. Just out of curiosity, do you still eat meat?
As little as I can, and the reason for that is because my doctor. I have rheumatoid arthritis, and had been on chemo for the last 7 years, and my doctor said, absolutely not. I tried to go vegan, and she's like, you have to have this protein or your immune system has to heal.
Okay, so the two beings are there, and then because I want to get to this because it's important, I'd like to spend kind of the last part of the interview talking about the ramifications. So they took you, I believe, to meet the quote unquote the lady. Tell us about how you got there and your first encounter.
Well, we're going to fast forward 5 years. And what happened there was when I came back, I told this to the public. I told it to the family. And of course, I was a deacon in the Pentecostal Holiness Church just before those days. I'd gotten sick and resigned, but still I was raised in a church. My wife and her family, my mother, all of big Christians. And well, all of a sudden, I was excited to tell what had happened, and that I'm no longer sick. I became ostracized from the community in the church. I was playing with the devil himself. And I'm like, but I was praying to God. I won't pray into the devil, and this is my argument with them. And they're like, if you ever want to go back to church, you can't ever talk about it again. So that ended that.
So that was 5 years go by. So you hadn't met the lady at this point. So those two beings gave you the feeling about, everything is a sentient being, and then they disappeared?
Yeah, they disappeared. And
that was it. So after, in the next 5 years, did you have any type of communication with them or the orbs? Did that continue? And you tried to get the word out, and people really gave you a hard time. And then I know you were taken advantage of in some ways by some networks and stuff like that who put your story out there, but they had a twist to it that was not very favorable to you. But you kept going, you kept living your life, and the Crohn's and was gone. But then you picked up rheumatoid arthritis, and you had to deal with that. So forgive me for kind of speeding the whole thing up. But then what happened? The 5 years later, you meet the lady.
Well, 5 years later, I was ready to give up. I didn't want to talk about it anymore because my children had been ridiculed at school so much by the teachers and their students in the hall. Because I told this, my whole family's suffering bad. Now, they were seeing it with me, at my home, our home. The phenomenon never quit. It was hovering over our house or over the cars or in the yard or in the house for all those 5 years. We were all seeing, and so we all became ostracized and isolated together. But I was ready to quit. I went outside and I said, I just want to get one picture. You'll let us see it, but I can't never get a photo. I can't tell my mom and dad, here you are, it's real. I can't tell these people, you're wrong, it is real. And so I said, I quit. I'll never talk about this again. Well, that didn't go over too good, because when I went to bed that night, it was Easter. It was Saturday night. I laid down in the bed at about 9:30 and just totally worn out. Went to sleep. 3 o'clock in the morning, I hear a voice say, arise. And it was a man. It sounded like thunder. I heard it. I heard it. It wasn't a dream. I jumped up out of my sleep. I looked and the clock said 3 a.m. I said, who's in my room? I heard that. I heard it. And next thing I know, I was in some sort of trance, like controlled by them. And I got up, I got fully dressed, I walked outside following these three shadowy figures. They led me back to the dog kennel where I'd met the little being before, 5 years earlier. And I'm going fast through this. There's a lot more detail in the book, but suddenly this wind comes out of the forest. This really strong wind gust hit me and blew me backwards. And as I was falling backwards to my back in the leaves, I saw a cow, a bull, a big bull come out of nowhere, out of the darkness, and ran over top. But the weird thing, I saw through it when it went over me, but it frightened me. Now I'm laying on my back. I roll to my stomach, so I'm looking the other way, right? As I push myself up to my knees, I'm getting up to run. All this happened in 3 seconds. When I get to my knees, my hands on the ground, my knees, and I'm about to stand up. This cow, I'm looking for it, but it's not there anymore. There's a lady there. And she's 6 foot from me. Her feet are 3 feet in the air, chin level to me. She's glowing like the most beautiful thing you could ever imagine. Her dress was white and sparkly, and it looked Roman, like it had rolls in it, and a collar, and barefooted, and the tops of her feet were all that was showing from her dress was long. And she looked at me. She leaned towards me and she said, you know why I'm here. And I knew why she was there. It went right into my soul. She said, this is your burden you must bear. Because, see, they convinced me when they first took me that I had to tell everybody I knew what happened. And I did, and it got me in bad trouble, my whole family. So I quit. She came and said, no, you're not going to quit. You must tell what you know. And if you do this, I will always be with you. And I'll allow you to take photos. I'll allow you to share our presence with others. Well, immediately, I began to be able to film them. I began to be able to have friends over, my mom, my dad, relatives, anyone about it, unless they were skeptic. And they could see it with me. And to this day, I'm studied by the government more than anybody in history, in the world, by this. And they see it with me.
So after that, and another Easter, she showed up again. This time, I'm just trying to make the best use of time. Forgive me for butting in. That you were taken kind of off planet to a faraway place that had kind of a desert environment, and then you were led, and around the corner in a canyon, she was on kind of a stone throne in this canyon, and showed up to you again. And what did she communicate this time?
That's when she told me about this alignment that was to come. She said that when the red star of Regulus appears on the horizon in Egypt, in the gaze of the Sphinx, and I could never understand why the first time they took me, that's what they showed me. I had visuals of Egypt, saw the
Mhm.
pyramids. I saw all these places. Never understood what it was. But when the lady came the second time, she said, when that star appears on the horizon in the gaze of the Sphinx, at that time, there'll be a new knowledge that comes to this world. And what does that mean? I'm not sure. But I know I told Lisa Hagen about it. Lisa's a very good friend of mine, her whole family, her mom and her grandma. She ran it with some friends of hers in the astrology world, and they found out it is really a real alignment that's going to take place in Easter of 2026.
So since
And
that point, Chris, what do you sense is what is going to happen? Are things happening now leading us to there, or is that a tipping point where everything's going to change? And what else have you gotten messaging about this for context since this occurred?
I really don't know, to tell you the truth. I don't want to put something out there that doesn't
I
happen
understand. Right.
true. I really only knew about an alignment, not a time and a date,
Okay.
but it comes to find out there is that.
What
But
is your sense?
if
Yeah.
my sense is that this world will know that there is a creator, that there was an intelligence that made humanity, and all this nonsense about evolution and all that's got to go bye-bye. And they're going to reset this whole world into a new way of thinking by then. That's my thought about it.
Okay.
And
So
I'm hoping that's where it goes.
So during the subsequent years, you've been kind of actually embraced in some ways by the government, by NASA. You've gotten out there, spread the word, worked in meetings and presentations, and been given top secret clearance in a lot of areas. So they, the powers that be, if you will, they recognize that you are onto something. So, and that's continued to this day. So what I want to ask for the benefit of our audience and also for myself is, this is so different. If you watch some of the shows that are about all the different beings from different planets, the Palladians and the reptilians and all the Dracos and the Ebens and the Greys and all of that, what you describe seems so completely unique. I'm wondering, how do you process that in terms of what everybody else is reporting? And has anybody else experienced what you're experienced besides seeing the orbs? Because it seems that's connected through your connection with the lady and these beings. That's why you're seeing the orbs, and that's why other people can see the orbs. But your experience seems so unique, Chris. Talk to us about, how do you feel about that and all the other information that's out there about all these different types of UFOs and all the information that's coming out about them.
All right. Well, let me say this that might ring a bell. Well, it did mine. I told MUFON when they came in 2008 to investigate this case. It was a year later when they came. I didn't talk about it for a year. They said, what do you think it was? I said, well, I think they were the angels from the Bible. Angels, that's just too much for us. There's got to be an alien spaceship or, I said, that didn't happen to me. I was on my knees praying. And these fiery balls come out of the sky. Remind me of the chariots in the Bible, fiery chariots, right? They came down and took my sickness away. Why would an alien do such? Well, they didn't have an answer for that. So I maintained for the last 17 years what happened to me was spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
They were more like spirits than physical beings. Of course, I don't know. I'm a baby at this, but I interact with them and I know what causes them to come, and that's prayer. I'm not a religious person anymore. I don't profess to be a religious person. I don't attend church. And I feel like I can have that commune with myself. I don't need nobody to show me how. In fact, I can show others how. Um,
Has
but
the lady been in contact you since the book came out?
Yeah.
And has the message changed at all? Has it extended? There's been more, or is it just stay on your course? Because the other thing I want to ask as part of this is, you got rid of the Crohn's and then you got rheumatoid arthritis. has that subsided also? So two questions
Well,
there. One about seeing the lady again, and two about your health condition.
well, yeah, the lady helped me make the decision over writing this book. It was an emphatic yes when I went out and asked about it. And
Mhm.
I actually filmed something with wings that flew over, big as an airplane. And it was glowing red and then changed to white. And I'll leave that at that. I'll release that someday. But it was something with big wings come flying right over me,
Okay.
glowing orange. And then it turned to white and turned south and went out of here. But that was a direct answer to should I do this book. Now, it
Okay.
was in Easter of 2022.
Okay.
This year, they came in the form of fire. This yellow fire started in February, all of March, and by the week of Easter, it subsided. It was gone. But that spirit came, and I had these little flames burning around me, next to my arm, over my head. Guess we had 25 people here, and this fire was burning in between us, around us. They all saw it. I got it on video. Took 100 videos over February, March, and first week of April. But the message hasn't changed, and I'm not sure what that message is, other than I, I just wanted the world to know. I don't want to influence people's thought on what it is we're doing. I never saw an alien. I've seen machines flying around. I got them on video in the day. I can take those in the day. These orbs can mimic anything. They can look like a metallic ball. They can look like a black
Mhm.
spear. They can look like a translucent ball. They can look like a flying saucer.
Got it.
They can mimic anything.
Let me ask you this, Chris. I'm sorry again to interrupt, but your arthritis, has that been cured now? Are you better?
Well, I wouldn't say it's cured, but I will say in 2019, early 2020, I was in a wheelchair. And my rheumatologist told me, if you get COVID, you're going to be in trouble. You'll
Mhm.
probably die from it. And it scared me so bad that I quit taking everything that I was on, which was a whole lot, about $25,000 a month worth of
Mhm.
medication.
Mhm.
That's how much they were charging my insurance. And I began to get better. I was praying every night for myself. I still do. But from a wheelchair to being able to walk by summer of 2020, and to today, I get to fly my model airplanes, which I've been doing all
Fantastic.
my life. But for years, I couldn't because
Mhm.
my hands, I couldn't even button my
Sure.
pants. Now I can put my shoes on. Still painful, but I'm 1,000% better than I was.
Okay.
And I give that to this.
So one of the things at the end of the book, you say anybody, and I want to get into this a little bit because I think it's important because you say anybody can contact, but by just you go outside at night and you say, I am here, and
Yeah.
then relax and just wait a little bit. And at some point, you'll get some type of communication. So my question is this, so many people have had horrific different types of experiences with extraterrestrials, whatever, where, they get taken up in a ship and they're probed and it's not necessarily pleasant all the time. You mentioned that these are more spiritual beings, and so it's okay to open yourself up to them. Talk to us about how everyday people who are looking for answers and are looking to raise their vibration can make this connection safely.
But let me tell you one thing that I didn't mention yet
Okay.
was something I found out through an academic professor. I won't say her name, but she's in the book. She came to me early on uh, in 2012, 13, after I spoke about the lady. Uh, she came right away. And she told me that MUFON,
Mhm.
which is the main reporting agency for UFOs, right, contacted her and gave her 2,000 reports. Now, how many do they get a year? 2,500 or less? They gave her 2,000 reports of people saying they had angelic experiences.
Okay.
You don't ever hear about those. You only hear about the little percentage that people claim they got anal probe, they got all this.
Right.
That never happened to me. I am so far removed from that, I can't fathom something like that happening. So I think the majority, what I'm saying, the majority of these reports are positive. My friends in the CIA tell me, and I'm connected to the highest levels, that I just spent Memorial Day weekend with some high level guys from Washington next door to Joe Biden's house. And we had orbs. We were filming orbs over Joe's house.
Amazing.
No joke.
Amazing.
And,
One thing I want to mention to the audience, Chris, and forgive me again, is that since this occurred, you have kind of gotten some powers where you've been part of the healing process for certain people. You become more psychic, if you will. Talk to us a little bit about that. We're running out of time, but I thought that's important that your abilities have been enhanced. And I'm thinking that I guess anybody's could be enhanced if we know how to work with them and we have this type of contact and communication.
what I will say is that when the lady came the second time, within 2 weeks, I found out there was a dog. My dog was badly injured, and there were witnesses there. Grant Cameron is a UFO researcher, one of the bigger ones out there. He was there. He witnessed it. The dog had a big gash across his jugular vein right here, and it was pouring blood everywhere. And I knew she was going to die. There wasn't no helping her. None of us knew what happened to her. She was sitting right beside us when it happened. And she ran in the house bleeding. I drug her out and put my hand on her neck. And I cried out, Lord, what do I do? She's going to die. Help me. And when I did that, immediately her wound disappeared in front of everybody. That big 2-inch hole was gone now.
Amazing.
And the blood stopped. And she stood up and waggled her tail and walked away. Well, that had me in Washington, D.C. within a few months.
Sure.
With some of the most prominent families up there, sick children.
Okay. I got time for one last question for you, Chris, because we're running tight. Where can people find out more information about you? And what would be your message be to our audience out there in terms of the totalitarian, the total experience for you? What can people take from this to help them live their best lives?
My advice would be don't buy into the negative. There's negative everywhere. And if you seek negative, you can find it. But I don't watch news. I don't watch anything negative. I don't partake in negative conversations. I try, if I lived in a negative way, I would never see this phenomenon. It will not come around people that are negative.
Okay.
It will not come around people that are skeptical. So if you want to see this, you have to humble yourself. You have to change your heart. You have to be in service to others. In other words, have that feeling. When somebody's sick or injured, it makes me want to cry for them, right? And it wasn't like that before. I would hurt a bear or a bug in a heartbeat, but now I see life in a different way. And
all right, Chris Bledsoe, my very special guest on Guys Radio. The name of the book is UFO of God. Chris, where can people find out more about you and your book and your work?
I have a website you can go to is ufoofgod.com. And there is a link to Amazon. You can buy all these, the hardback, the paperback, the audio book, or the Kindle ebook on Amazon itself, or you can get there from my website. But on my website, we're building it. We're constantly updating it. And so there are links to, we're going to put links to where I'm going to be signing books and appearing. And also there are testimonies from U.S. government officials on there, several high-ranking officials. So.
Well, listen, great job. You're doing great work. Again, forgive me for being Mr. Budinsky on everything, but I really want to get as much information out there for our audience as possible. And you do a wonderful job explaining everything in detail in the book, UFO of God. And you're very sincere about the work you're doing, and you're doing it to help mankind. So thank you for the work. Keep going. We're here to support you. Thank you, Chris Bledsoe, for being on Guys Radio. I hope we can do it again, because I think there's a lot more to share.
Absolutely. We didn't even touch the surface of it. So, yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and call me anytime, and I'll be glad to come back on. And I tell everybody to watch this August the 1st on the new hit series Beyond Skinwalker.
Okay.
They're featuring us, my family, myself, on the grand finale. and they want me to plug the show. So I can't tell you what it's about, but I believe everybody that sees it is going to be in total awe.
Awesome.
I really believe so.
Thank you so much, Chris. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, sir.
If you enjoy the guests and content I bring you each and every week to Guys Guys Radio and Guys Guys TV, please support us by subscribing and following on our platforms. Thank you.